If you're like many people, you probably struggle with forgiveness. Like, what does it actually look like? And do I have to forgive? And how many times do I have to forgive the same offense? And how do I know if I have forgiven? And what if I can't forgive? There's so many questions around forgiveness, and because forgiveness is so central to relationship, I think it's important for us to figure out what forgiveness is not, and what does it practically look like to walk out forgiveness. That's what we're going to talk about today on Relation Shots. Hey, welcome to Relation Shots. My name's Eric Wooten. If this is your first time hanging out with us, welcome to the place to get practical relationship advice that actually works in your relationship. Yeah, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and click the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss upcoming videos. If you want a free guide to intimacy, you'll find a link for that in the description area below. And if you're looking for a consistent way to strengthen your relationship, you may want to consider our Altered Marriage membership, where you can find access to contents, videos, worksheets, live Q&As, and the kind of community that you'll need to strengthen your relationship. More information in the description area below for that as well. So let's talk forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of those areas that I think gets confusing. Not only is it hard to do, but necessary in a relationship, but I think a lot of times we don't know exactly what it looks like. And because there's so much confusion, I don't think we do it very well. So in this video, I want to talk about what forgiveness is not, because sometimes we got it messed up, which is why we don't want to forgive. What forgiveness actually is. What does forgiveness look like? What are we doing? And then how do we actually walk out the process of forgiveness? Meaning, what components are necessary in order for us to walk out forgiveness? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. So let's start with what forgiveness is not. Here's some things that forgiveness is absolutely not. Forgiveness is not minimizing. You don't act like it's not that big of a deal. Forgiveness is not denying, acting like it never happened. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgive and forget is false. You place responsibility appropriately, maintain appropriate boundaries, and then you don't forget, but you will remember it differently as you heal. Forgiveness is not prematurely or foolishly reconciling. There's a big difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness takes one. Reconciliation takes two. Forgiveness is not letting the person off the hook. Forgiveness is not being a doormat. Forgiveness is not just gritting your teeth and working or trying harder. Forgiveness is not sweeping it under the rug. Forgiveness is not taking responsibility for the other person's offense. Those things are not forgiveness. And if you think that's forgiveness, that's probably why you don't want to extend forgiveness to the other person. So that's what forgiveness is not. And part of the problem I think we have in not wanting to forgive is if we think those things are forgiveness, then we're not going to want to do them because it doesn't seem like we have any hope not to end up in the same place in the future. So that's what forgiveness is not. Let's talk about what forgiveness is. And let me just say this. If you're a Christian, what I'm about to say applies to you. If you're not, then we're going to get right in the practical aspect of what forgiveness is. But if you're a Christian, you already have the mandate and the model for what forgiveness is. In Colossians 3, it says that we're to bear with each other and forgive each other. And it says, forgive as Christ forgave you. So there's your model. He forgave unconditionally, without you asking for it, without you earning it or deserving it. He gave it unconditionally. And so that's how we're to forgive others. So if you're not a Christian, it's still important to learn and understand what forgiveness is, because harboring unforgiveness, all that does is keep us tied to the offense so that we can't walk in the freedom. And you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever had something where somebody offended you and you chose not to forgive them, and yet they're walking around acting like they don't have a care in the world and it's not bothering them at all, and meanwhile it's eating you up every day, that's because they don't have a care in the world. They've moved on, and your unforgiveness is keeping you trapped in the situation while the person who actually offended you is walking around in freedom. So it's not healthy in relationships to withhold forgiveness. So what forgiveness is, let's talk about that. Forgiveness is dismissing a debt. It is releasing the demand that others owe you. It is extended regardless of a lack of repentance. It is given even if it's never earned. It's releasing your resentment to the offender even if they don't say sorry. And it's releasing your rights to dwell on the offense, and to keep bringing the offense up again. We love to do that. When you forgive somebody, you're giving up your right to keep beating them over the head with the club of what they did. You're saying, I'm going to choose not to bring it up in every discussion. I'm going to choose that when you say, hey, it'd be nice if you could pick up your clothes on the floor, I'm not going to go, well, at least I didn't sleep with anybody. Like that's your trump card that you can always pound them over the head with because you've chosen not to forgive them. So now we know what forgiveness is not, we know what forgiveness is, but what does it look like to walk it out? And I think there's 4 components of forgiveness. We'll talk about number 4 specifically, may not always be a part of it, but the first 3 for sure. So I think these are 4 components of how do we walk forgiveness out. And number 1 is this: you have to acknowledge the offense. You got to name it. Don't dismiss it. Don't deny it. Don't pretend like it didn't happen. Don't excuse it. Don't justify it. You have to actually acknowledge the offense and name it. Don't just be like, well, I forgive you. What do you forgive me for? Well, just be because you're mean. Well, that just sounds like a character trait. What specifically did they do that was mean? You need to identify, here is the behavior, and here is how your behavior has negatively impacted me. I'm acknowledging it and I'm naming it. So step 1 is we've got to acknowledge the offense. Step 2 is we've got to experience the offense. Yeah, we got to feel it. Listen, there's going to be emotions that come along with it. There's going to be pain that comes along with it. We don't just act like it didn't happen. We don't just sweep it under the rug. We don't just say, well, I forgive and I move on. There oftentimes is loss when there's an offense. Maybe loss of what we thought the ideal relationship was going to be that it's not. Maybe loss of the perfect character we thought the other person had. Maybe loss of a sense of security or trust. But there's often a grieving process associated with an offense that we need to forgive, and we need to sit on it sometimes. We need to feel it. We don't need to act like there's no feelings along with it and no, I'm fine, we'll just keep moving on. It is a process to grieve sometimes through the hurt and pain and loss of an offense, so we need to experience it. We need to feel it. And then step number 3 is you need to forgive the offender. And that's all the stuff we just talked about. You need to release them from the debt that you feel they owe you. You need to choose not to keep bringing it up again. You need to allow them to be able to rebuild trust again or do whatever they need to do in the relationship, but you've got to make a choice that says, I forgive you. And guess what? I'm choosing not to bring it up again. I'm almost choosing to forget it, even though we said you don't actually forget it, but I'm choosing to forget the offense again. And then there's a 4th step that may or may not be a part of the process. So steps 1, 2, and 3, which is acknowledge the offense, experience the offense, and forgive the offender. We should rinse and repeat this often in marriage. You're going to have all kinds of little situations that you need to forgive your spouse for, little things they did inadvertently. So this is a rinse and repeat. This should be a regular part of a relationship. Now, in the case of a real grievous offense, maybe an infidelity or maybe abuse or something that's really broken the foundation of the relationship, step number 4 may or may not be a part of the process. But step number 4 is reconcile if possible. Now, it may not always make sense. Sometimes we may need a separation in there. Sometimes we may need to get away from each other and get a counselor involved, get other parties involved, because sometimes we may have a hard time reconciling if the other person is not willing to be a part of the process. So reconciliation requires that the other person accepts responsibility. Reconciliation requires that the other person has apologized, and there's actual real repentance and remorse involved in the situation, that they're actually willing to allow us to set new boundaries so we don't end up in that situation again. And so this idea of reconciling may not apply in every instance of forgiveness. You can still forgive somebody, but if they're not taking responsibility and if the brokenness is great enough and it's done enough to the relationship, you may not be able to reconcile the relationship with them. And you may need to seek some outside help on what that looks like. But there's just a little, maybe a 30,000 foot view. We could talk about forgiveness forever, but what forgiveness is absolutely not, what forgiveness does look like, and then how do we walk that thing out? Now, as I've said many times before, I think anything in marriage requires a good community, and forgiveness and reconciliation is one of those areas where you may need some outside help, some people to walk with you through the pain of what's going on and provide accountability for both you and the offender so that we can walk in better relationship moving forward. If you need a place to find community, our Altered Marriage membership may be the place for you to get not only resources, but some other people around you who are also trying to grow their relationship as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what has worked for you in the area of forgiveness in your relationship. Drop us a comment in the comment section below. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on Relation Shots.